policy analysis and support. Well, that's work package 7. You already knew that I knew about policy. So actually, Une made some brief introductory with a slide when he said, oh, there are many policies in Europe. Actually, it is so. So it's like the children's games where you have to find your way so that the mole gets out and on the way reaches to all the other objects. So basically, there are a dozen or more than a dozen. I'll give a slide later on. There are so many policies and legislations that mention soil and that have an impact on soil, but something specifically focused on soil there is not existing, as you probably might know. There was a soil thematic strategy in 2006, then there came a proposal directive along, the soil framework directive, that got stuck and blocked in the parliament, and then it finally got withdrawn in 2014. So in a way that is good news, because that opens space for something new, to which the Commission says to be still committed. Well, let's see how that goes. Probably not as fast, but anyhow, there's like some chapter that is now closed and they're starting up something new. This something new has already started. In October 2015, they have set up an EU expert group on soil protection, so that might be something relevant for us to discuss with. Next April, there's the second soil expert group, soil protection expert group. So I'm also presenting there already anyhow, so I can brief you in the next meeting what has been said. We can also discuss whether there is something from SoilCare we can already bring. Okay, so this is like a very easy slide on all the policies that somehow are linked to soils. So we have the soil thematic strategy. It was just basically a bit broad and asking to integrate all and everything, to also raise awareness, to do more research. It's not really particularly sharp and engaging. So then there is the 7th Environmental Action Program. Soil is one part, as there are many parts in there, like water and air and so forth, etc. So they commit to have sustainable management of the soil. Okay, that's it basically. The Water Framework Directive, of course, it wants to focus on the river basins, but nutrient management is of course one of the parts. Also, there are measures to be taken to achieve water quality in the rivers and in coastal areas. So buffer strips, for example, is one example of a measure in a buffer strip, of course, typically to have like a grazing land on the bank. Floods directive, there's a lot of attention nowadays on natural water retention measures. Soil are typically like areas where infiltration is important. So so nitrates directive, etc. and so forth. So you see there's a whole lot of directives where there is somewhere an importance for soil, but not directly clear at first sight what the impact is for soils. Important ones that I haven't gone through now are rural development, where of course we have the rural development plans, which set out the priorities for rural development, where they get, and based on these plans they get financing, partly under CAP, partly from DG Regio. So rural development plans are the important things to get finances from. Then we have adaptation strategy, the Birds and Habitats Directive, the EIA, SEA directives for environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment, landfill directives, the Waste Framework Directive, Pesticides Directive, the Environmental Liability Directive. All those somehow have to do with soil. So there's of course a whole lot of complex things, and we try to get some clarity and potentially solutions. So the deliverables that we want to do in this work package. So by month 24 we will do an inventory of opportunities and bottlenecks in policy to facilitate the adoption of soil improving techniques. I'm still a bit fuzzy after Une's presentation of what the soil improving farming cropping system now actually is. I used the word technique. I think I also saw that in the proposal, but it seemed that from Une's presentation that it's much more than a technique, but rather like some sort of a farming system. Probably useful to discuss what actually is meant. So deliverable, the first deliverable, the second deliverable, of course, based on the first list of the inventory of opportunities and bottlenecks, we will come up with some policy alternatives. We do this at the EU level and also at some sites. So we propose actually to do it at four sites that have a particular interest in policy. 4 is proposed just to have a more in-depth understanding. So if you have an interest of volunteering your study site to be involved in work package 7, then come and talk to me. I heard already, like from Switzerland, I had some earlier comment on policy. I think also from Flanders I heard something, but I don't know if that meant that they want to have work done on policy in their area. Anyhow, I'm looking for volunteers on which I can test together with yourselves and with others, of course, the work on policy and enforced studies. Then the policy briefings is, of course, an important instrument to translate or to present our findings to a policy audience. I guess this is to be discussed also with work package 8, how exactly this overlaps or what has to be done with that. But anyhow, that's also one of the deliverables. So the partners involved, well, Milieu is the lead, then also TGASC, I'm not sure how to pronounce actually, but that's in the link with the landmark project. Then we have the study site leads, so they support then those 4, well, it doesn't have to be exactly 4, we can see on the planning and the resources and stuff available. They can support the policy analysis. We can also help that and then co-create good policy alternatives, which we can also then bring into the stakeholder workshops. Then the work package leads, of course, the policy briefings, as far as I understood, is to be developed for the whole project across work packages. But this also needs to be discussed at work package 8. Okay, then slightly, shortly, quickly, of each of the deliverables. So the inventory of policy barriers and alternatives. So the questions are here: why are soils continuing to degrade from a policy point of view, of course, and why aren't those techniques being used? Because obviously they are not really innovative and already existing. So we will do that by means of interviews, workshops. We do that EU level and at study site level, but of course there's like an intermediate level as well. There are all sorts of institutes and associations and companies and stakeholders in between. We also have like the national level, that often regulates the subsidies, for example, so they also need to be involved. And there are also like municipalities. I know, for example, in Flanders there's like a subsidy, a law that gives subsidies to municipalities for to contract erosion. So then we can also talk to the private sector, the public sector. So there was a whole story on stakeholder involvement by Mark before. So this also, of course, asks for a coordinated approach. We're not going to talk to the same persons at other moments. So the EU level, the national level is with work package 6. The local level is together with work package 3. Though the national level may shift between, anyhow, we have to discuss a lot of things and see how it all goes. But the basic idea is that we do workshops and interviews. So then the policy alternatives. So we look for solutions to the barriers that exist. So this of course refers to the adoption of the soil improving cropping systems. So our strategy here is that there is not one best solution, but there are several good ones. It depends what your focus is, of course, what is more interesting to you. There will be, of course, several stakeholder groups. Maybe for one group, profitability is more important, and for the other one, environmental conservation is more important. So there will be probably different solutions that they choose, but all solutions that exist should be having this multifunctionality in mind. They should be both profitable and both environmentally sustainable, and we have a whole set of criteria likely. So, but probably there's not just one that is the best or the most optimal, so we will have several good ones. So how do we do this selection? In a multi-criteria assessment. This is interesting because also work package 3 and 4 proposed to have like a multi-criteria risk assessment. I think Mark called it a matrix ranking, and then Gudrun called it something integrated assessment framework. Okay, it must be the same as this. Well, let's see what everyone meant. And so we also do scenarios on the future. This is also what Hedwig told. So co-selection with stakeholders, we cannot just come up with stuff ourselves. Well, at least there's to cross-check it with them, or well, that's also a method that we have to check. So quantitative assessment of the criteria where possible, but many aspects probably we need a qualitative assessment, like governance arrangements or adoption of measures or acceptability is probably qualitative, while like impact on soil organic matter is probably quantitative, that we combine it together in one frame. So there are some criteria on which I want to select the alternatives, which have to be decided and agreed, but the ideas that I come up with, or like the effectiveness on soil quality, which we have to define. The implementation cost, we could use cost effectiveness as a criterion, but we have of course many other possibilities to account for cost. Wider benefits of alternatives beyond the main purpose being soil quality. We could also look at other ecosystem services, other functionalities, potential conflict that exists if you do one measure and that completely is against the interest of another target group, then we can also not go for that. So the fitness check with the socioeconomics, for example, affordability, but also with the institutional context. It's no use that you transfer a whole model to an authority which hardly has manpower. For example, at the municipalities, for example, there's often not really too much capacity dealing with complex scientific data. And of course, then finally, long-term sustainability. That's then adaptation part. Then the policy briefings. This is of course a bit of an approach that's used in many research projects, but the basic reason I think to have policy briefings is to promote soil improving cropping systems to those that want to adopt it. So we can do that at EU level, but also member state level. So we have to clearly define actually who it is for that we are writing these policy briefings. And so we can provide evidence, what we find in the literature review, what we find in these long-term experiments, or what now the advantages or disadvantages are of particular techniques, such that authorities or decision makers can have evidence in choosing in favor for a particular technique. We've seen the same sort of problem under the Water Framework Directive, where they needed to choose for green infrastructure rather than grey. Why would we need to choose for a green infrastructure? A dike can work as well as a vegetated bank, vegetated river bank, and then you need to come up with arguments that that is okay. 2 minutes, okay, that's fine. Okay. So that we need to come up with evidence. Decision makers in that point of view are a bit fuzzy. At the one hand, they want to have evidence on decisions they want to take. But at the other end, if you give too much evidence, they also don't like it. So it's a bit like finding the right level of evidence. Also, precisely in the question they're asking. Often they don't know the question before you give some evidence. So it's a bit of a tricky way to work with decision makers. Well, that's it.
Good, thank you very much.